As we briefly touched upon in previous lessons, it is possible for you to use periods of dopamine fasting in many different ways. Yes, so you can do a serious, strict dopamine fast whenever you feel your brain really needs it. And then you can just allow yourself to do pretty much whatever you want in between. Or then you can try to stay as healthy and as productive as possible in between your fasting protocols as well, to try to keep your dopamine system fresh as long as possible. So those two are kind of like the two opposites of the spectrum. And then you can obviously find something there in between those two as well. Now, of course, I'm not going to recommend that you spend the time in between your fasting protocols in a complete hedonic decadence. Of course not, since healthy living is always to be preferred. And also, if you have any addictions or even just have a so-called addictive personality, then you need to be careful flirting with instant gratification stuff, especially activities that are close to or highly related to your core addiction. Now that said, the reality is that most people are going to fall somewhere in the middle of these two, even if they don't really plan on it, simply because of the fact that we live in a world where we are constantly bombarded with supernormal stimuli in so many different forms. And also, it is also important to know that just as long as you're not hurting yourself or anyone else, there's nothing wrong with enjoying good things that the world has to offer either. I personally love the idea of going hard and being super dopamine healthy for 12 weeks or so, followed by a few weeks of vacation where I take a more relaxed approach to life. Now don't get me wrong here, it's not like I'm going to jump into an unhealthy way of living. No. I will still keep enjoying my newfound drive and productivity as I keep working on my goals, but I will divide my year into periods where I'm super focused, followed by a period with more relaxation. A so-called vacation mode, where I allow myself to bring back some of the good things life has to offer. It is important to understand that after you have done one of the fasting protocols, your dopamine system will be much more sensitive to dopamine again. This means that you will perceive almost every activity imaginable as more fun and more exciting. And this is obviously also true with all those low-value dopamine activities we try to avoid during the fast. They too will be much more pleasurable. Now, obviously, most of you are going to want to explore this and take advantage of the newfound sensitivity again. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. So, if you, for example, want to use one of the fasting protocols to get more enjoyment out of playing video games after your fast is done, then hey, that's totally possible. It's your life and your rules. Or if you want to use this course to get more excitement out of dating or meeting new people, then hey, go for it. However, here comes the warning then, as you perhaps were waiting for. If you, for example, have an alcohol addiction or a porn addiction, I would really stay away from the temptation to try to get more pleasure out of your addiction by resetting your dopamine system in between your binges. Because even though that will work, that's a dangerous path to walk. Studies have even shown that so-called intermittent relapses can create an even stronger addiction. So I would strongly recommend against doing that. There are so many things that you can draw pleasure from in life besides your potential addictions. So if you want to use the fasting protocols to get more pleasure out of instant gratification things, then please go for something that you are not addicted to. However, again, of course, at the end of the day, it is still your life and your rules. But please consider my words carefully. So, how often should you do these fasts, and when should you jump back on a new protocol? Well, since we now know that these protocols really can be used as tools for your productivity as well as your ability to feel excitement and pleasure, then if we are a bit creative here, then obviously the possibilities becomes almost endless. Let's take a few examples. Let's say that you know that you're going to have a number of job interviews a month from now and you want to be extra sharp that week. Well, then it would not make that much sense to start a fasting protocol the week of your job interviews. It would be much better to start a fasting protocol that is coming up to an end that week, or that is still ongoing that week, but that you have been running well prior to it, as it takes a while for the dopamine system to change its set point. The Dopamine Focus Explorer could be a good protocol for this, just as an example. I know I myself am definitely taking things like that into account, and for me it can be things like having an important trumpet gig coming up 20 days from now, for example, and I want to be extra sharp for that one. Or if I don't have anything special at all for a very long time, I still like to be doing some form of the longer protocols in periods. And then I'm going to consider those periods the super productive parts of my year, as I already told you. And then I'm pretty sure I will always follow these protocols with a few weeks of so-called vacation mode. Speaking of vacation, let's say you're going to be traveling for 2 weeks to some amazing Pacific island in March, and you want to be doing everything you can do to really make that trip as pleasurable and memorable as possible. And so you'd want to go into that trip with dopamine receptors highly sensitive to dopamine, but you don't want to be spending several weeks for that. Well, then the dopamine focused apprentice would be a perfect 48-hour fast. By doing a 48-hour dopamine fast before you leave, I can guarantee that the trip will be even more amazing than it would otherwise be. And say you went a bit too crazy during that trip, or during any vacation for that matter, and you would like to clean up a bit after your vacation, well, then you could do another apprentice protocol when you get back home. The point is, there is really no end to how much you can do with this, and I really would like to encourage you to keep dopamine fasting for the rest of your life, in periods, at least on some level, just as long as you don't feel that you're pushing too hard and too often. But keep using it as a tool and keep it there on some level, going on and off and on and off, and then be smart about when to use what protocol and so on.